Hey folks, welcome back to the channel, your home for all content Lord of the Rings home. Today's video is for Dwarf Lords only. It's an only Dwarfs video. I want to talk about how my Dwarf team is doing, how well they're doing in the raids, and some of the big things that are currently wrong with them. So, let's talk about it. Basically, there are 4 or 5 bugs that are plaguing pretty much specifically the Dwarf team. I think it's really hindering their ability to do well in the raids. This is some Chapter 1 footage. Let me just go ahead and play it. My Dwarf team's about 34k. I don't have Fro on it, and so I use Fili, Kili, Bifur lead with Legolas and Gimli. One of the things about Chapter 1 that I want to talk about is with these kind of characters, they're very slow and they don't really have any cleanses. So the Skull Crusher goes, you're basically going to get slow on everybody. Turns out to kind of be okay because they could kind of come right after the Skull Crusher. One great thing about the team in Chapter 1, right, is that you have Kili's Basic, which summons Fili as an assist, so you automatically get 2 stacks there. So it's actually pretty normal to be able to get 7 or 8 stacks on the Bomber. Then you kind of are just waiting for the right Bomber RNG, right? One thing I always do is I always do Legolas' special 1 to start, because then he gets the Nimble on himself and he doesn't get affected by the slow. That Nimble does mean that you aren't going to trigger Bifur's leadership ability where, like, if everybody gets attacked, you get defensive and might and counterattack if you're a dwarf and whatnot. The whole goal when you're playing dwarves for Chapter 1 is essentially you just want to get everybody else down a little bit. You don't have a lot of AoE on this team. You want to get everybody else down a little bit and then just kind of put more stacks on the Bomber. So it's actually a pretty RNG dependent team. Which I'm not too happy about. One of the big bugs that is currently plaguing the Dwarf team is actually just recently. It came, I think, the latest patch, basically. And it is that Gimli no longer retaliates when a fellowship or a Dwarf ally gets below 75% health, which is basically his whole passive. And a big part of his damage output is doing that. And he can't do that anymore, which is very unfortunate. My current Dwarf team, I've upgraded them since I've took this footage, but basically I now have Fili's healing ability, his special 2, and his basic all the way up to level 6, so I should be getting actually a lot more potential, a lot more healing out of this team, which I'm very excited for. It's got some good defensive capabilities because of Bifur's leadership ability, but it still doesn't have a cleanse, and it doesn't have, great healing. Basically, doesn't matter whether Gimli is taunting or not, for whatever reason, they always seem to go for Gimli. This is one of my better runs here, so we'll watch until the end here. Boom. I think that gets me to 4. Yeah, so this is basically where I end up. So one of the big things for Chapter 1, one of the big bugs for Chapter 1 that's kind of affecting things is Gimli doesn't have his Retaliate anymore. And why that's a big deal for Chapter 1 is kind of why you also want Retaliate for your Rivendell team. Basically, everybody, attacks your dwarves, and then Gimli can retaliate, and that gives you a chance on your first or second bomb to wipe out the whole squad. And that means you're spending less time kind of making sure you get 2 bombers in a row to get a good run, and you can kind of guarantee that earlier on, if that makes sense. Okay, I think basically the run is over here. Let me pull up the next video. Okay, so here's some footage I took from Chapter 2. This is basically where the bulk of the bugs affect your ability for the dwarves to do well. My 34k squad does all right in difficulty 3. They can almost always topple the troll pretty consistently, but getting that last little bit of health down, they can't really do it. And that's what you really need, basically, to get your squad to a higher score. If you can topple the troll and get that last bit of health, you're going to get over 300k points, which means you should be doing that instead of difficulty 2. I'm going to show you some difficulty 2 footage, but the difficulty 3 thing is interesting because it's about a 34k squad, and I think the recommended power for difficulty 3 is 46k, so it's about 12k underneath, which I think is decent. I think there's still this general bug at the moment where essentially if you put the disable on the cave troll, he can still use his roar. And his roar is where he clears all the banes off of himself, right? And then gives himself stacks of counterattack. That's really how he gets his momentum train rolling. I think he might also double all the stacks of momentum he currently has when he does that. At least he does when he's enraged. So Disable not being able to counter that is kind of an important issue because that's a very viable strategy for making sure that momentum stacks don't keep building on him. They might have fixed it by now, but last I checked, they did not. I don't think he does it here, though. The second big bug here is that Biffer is special where he throws in the jam and he's supposed to blind. It's also supposed to apply a 2-turn slow to large creatures, right? That's kind of one of the big whole points. But you saw there was no slow that got applied, which is kind of a big deal because that's what they sold this character as being able to do. And specifically around the time when Chapter 2 of the raid was coming out, right? Which is very important. And this should be an easy fix. They should just be able to give the cave troll a large tag and then say, okay, everything is fixed. It's on the Trello tracker. We'll take a look at that towards the end of the video. But kind of a big mess up here in my mind because they sold this character as being able to do this unique thing, and it was related to Chapter 2. They pointed out in the kit reveal, right, was one of the tips and tricks for Biffer, and he can't do it. So that's a big thing. So we kind of got 3 issues here. Disable not really working on the cave troll, Gimli not retaliating, and then Biffer not being able to apply slow to the cave troll. The last one, we'll see if we can get to it again. It's also dealing with Keely. Keely has 2 specific bugs that are kind of affecting him. Let me see if I can kind of move around here. That's the disable. And this one. Okay, his special 2. His special 2 is supposed to apply a bleed and then an additional up to 3 bleeds. So 4 total, an additional 3 bleeds for every boon on the enemy character. However, what ends up happening, one, it got resisted here, but what ends up happening essentially is that it doesn't recognize momentum as a boon. So you only ever apply 1 stack of bleed. And the difference between 1 stack of bleed and 4 stacks of bleed on the cave troll is actually massive, right? That's the difference between 5% and 20% damage. So half of one of those bars, and I think this is how it works. Either half of one of those bars or like 2 whole bars if you can land the bleeds, which is massive. That's a big way to get the cave troll down, especially early on in the second, you topple him, you bring him back up, and then once he's enraged, if you can stack those bleeds on there before he gets a lot of resistance, then you've done work to kind of get him back down to that second time, which I think is very important. So I'm basically, I think, able to kind of cap out here at, let's see, about probably like 250-ish. Yeah, 250-ish. So like I said, I can topple it pretty consistently in difficulty 3, which is very nice. This time around, I think I will be able to just do difficulty 3 and get that last little bit. Let's take a look at the Trello board. If you don't know, this is where they track a lot of their bugs. I don't know how up to date they're keeping this, but the 2 of the bugs that I mentioned are in here specifically. The sticky situation does not apply slow to the Moria Cave Troll. They're investigating that. I hope that's an easy fix. And then this does not stack additional believes to the Moria Cave Troll if he has boons. Again, that's something that they're looking at. I know that they're also aware of the Gimli Retaliate. I submitted a bug report and got some responses on that. And I also know that they are aware of the disable because I submitted footage to CG Heme of that whole situation. Not that particular case, a different case in one of my raid teams. So I'm hoping this gets resolved soon. I'm going to continue to do updates about the dwarves because I don't think a lot of people are building them, at least a lot of content creators. And I think they're an interesting team. And I've got some great ideas I think I want to do. So getting Fro up and then maybe doing a Feely, Keely, Biffer, Fro. And so no Legolas and Gimli, but doing a Halberad as well. And that way on the Cave Troll, I can use Halberad's basic to apply Weak-Minded. And then I can land all my other debuffs that I need to land with the dwarves. And I think that'll be a fun, interesting little puzzle to figure out if I can do that or not. But for now, that's all I've got to show you. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.